Hello, and welcome to the session, Concrete and Abstract HCM. You Need Both, with Brent Skinner. Here are a few important pieces of information before we begin. First, you'll notice that there is a chat box on your session screen, as well as Q&A. Please use the Q&A feature if you have a question about the session content. We have a team of subject matter experts who will receive your questions and address them as quickly as possible. Secondly, please note that professional development credits are automatically issued if you attend qualified sessions and stay on the session screen for the entire session. You can find all of your certifications in the briefcase against your profile. It may take up to 24 hours after the session is over for your credits to appear. Lastly, if you experience any technical difficulties, please visit the Help tab. Brent Skinner's background affords him an uncommon understanding of the competitive landscape for HCM technology and how vendors market and sell their products and services and endeavor to keep their customers successful. Quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Brent is host of the #HRTechChat video podcast and co-founder of 360 Insights, where he is also director and principal analyst of the HCM technology practice. Drawing on his current research, as well as his experience as former principal analyst at Nucleus Research and former technology editor for HRO Today, Brent enjoys exploring and discussing the future of work. Here's Brent.
Thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today on abstract and concrete HCM. I hope this will be an illuminating and very interesting presentation for folks who are attending. Just moving ahead a little bit here. I've worked several swim lanes of the HCM market space for the better part of 2 decades now. And I've been a principal analyst previously elsewhere, worked on the vendor side a couple of times, and I've even been a journalist in this space. So I've been observing this market space for a while. Just a super quick note here on what 360 Insights is about, just in case anybody is wondering. We are very interested at 360 Insights in looking at the decision-making process and the benefits that people in enterprise software and the benefits that users experience from those technologies once they decide which ones to use. On the decision-making side of things, this is a little bit old hat at this point, but 15 years ago, maybe 10, IT was very much driving the bus, and that was they made the decision on what to use. A lot of stuff was still on premises, and there weren't many other stakeholders involved. That's changed just absolutely compared to then today. Today, it's a line of business leaders. We want to talk about HCM. It's many of you folks watching today are making some of the selection process, major decisions on selection of technology. But you're also dealing with a number of stakeholders, all sorts of people, herding the cats. You're working with financial decision makers. You're working with executives who are making final decisions. I've seen this firsthand. There's a lot of people that need to align and reach an accord in decision making on what kind of technology to use for any line of business. And that's what we're focused on in 360 Insights. And we find it very fascinating. Just super quickly here, we have a global executive advisory council, a number of leaders in the HCM space. That's HR, payroll, talent acquisition, learning, who join our Global Executive Advisory Council. And by doing so, they have an opportunity to provide feedback and thoughts on our research before we publish it. And we also have a symposium that we will be throwing a symposium in mid-May of this year, our first ever. So, on to Concrete and Abstract HCM. Here we have our obligatory Morpheus theme, meme, if you will, from the Matrix. Most Gen Xers will understand this. Maybe some of the older millennials. A lot of people have seen it too, but it's especially palpable for us. I remember when the movie came out, I was blown away, and it's funny to think about how long ago it was now. But we have our red pill, blue pill moment right now for this presentation. You can continue on with the blue pill, being blue pilled, and just kind of wondering, okay, how do I make these things around employees' feelings or employee experience? How do I make this? I just don't understand how to make this make sense to these folks in the organization where I am that just don't see it that way. They see HCM as dollars and cents. You can go on forever in that sort of mode of thinking. You can take the blue pill now, or you can take the red pill and be prepared to perhaps have your mind blown today. I don't know, but to see HCM, to understand HCM, possibly in a way you haven't previously, or in a way that you didn't realize you always did understand it. So you can take the red pill or the blue pill, and I'll wait a few seconds here, and I'll let you folks make your decision before we continue. Was that about 5 seconds there? Okay. Let's move on. All the red-pilled among you have decided to continue with us, and here we go. So I'm here to talk to you today about the two hemispheres of HCM. And when I talk about hemispheres, I mean there's two ways of looking at HCM, two bodies of HCM and how it expresses itself. I actually wrote about this back in the fall of last year, and it actually serves as the premise, or I would say the mother research agenda for our for 2021 for 360 Insights. It's this idea that human capital management has two hemispheres. One is concrete, and if you look at your screen there, those are the readily apparent aspects of HCM that make total sense to accountants, total sense to any other, maybe to operations folks, these kinds of people who they want to understand, how does HCM affect the bottom line in terms of mitigating risk, containing cost, those two things. All right. So you have processing payroll on time. That needs to happen. All right. You need to make sure that your union employees have 40 hours per week. That's something, if that doesn't happen, you're in big trouble, and that's going to cost money. It's about calculating union staff overtime. It's about complying with the FLSA, OFCCP, etc. It's about combating buddy punching, right? Because you're losing money if you're not combating buddy punching, right? It's about reducing open requisitions for time to fill for those. It's about keeping an audit trail of annual reviews. So if you need to let anybody go, there's a trail, there's documentation there, so you can sort of cover your tracks and make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted. I almost said that the other way around. You want to track training for compliance, right? You want to make sure people who have the proper license, people who don't have the proper licenses aren't, scheduled for certain shifts, this sort of thing. It's all about getting gaining in efficiency and productivity. All of this kind of has to do with that, or with compliance and avoiding, penalties, costly fines, and these sorts of things. That's concrete HCM. That's one hemisphere of HCM. The other hemisphere is abstract HCM. This has to do with this is resonates with folks who like to think about employee feelings, and they are advocates for this, and they see it as important, to organizational success. It may be the very reason that you went into HR or related field. You're a people person. That's often what CHROs and chief people officers and other folks in HR or learning or talent management or talent acquisition, that's what they're all about. It's about decreasing staff anxiety over pay, right? It's about flexible scheduling to help them with their work-life balance, with the idea that they're going to be more present and productive in their jobs if their work-life balance is well balanced. Providing benefits selection consultation to help those employees experience less anxiety over that decision making. Ensuring recruiters are good brand ambassadors, right? Cultivating trust with continual performance feedback. So, it's not about that annual review just because it's a perfunctory thing, because we have to have an audit trail for compliance, but approaching performance management as a tool for motivation, right? Positive motivation. Building a learning focused organization, facilitating internal mobility, retaining your intellectual property, these sorts of things. Building a strong, lasting employer culture. This is the domain. These are the things of abstract HCM. So there's two sides to HCM, and that's very important. And it's I think essential to understand that and to learn how to present the two as one. And I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but really being able to present both of those ideas simultaneously to organizational leadership and helping them to maybe see HCM a little bit more holistically. And we'll get into all of that. So that was a short version. That was a short version of Concrete and Abstract HCM. And I'm now about to throw a lot at you. And I'm going to ask for forgiveness right off the bat. They say, I think the saying is ask for forgiveness afterward. I'm asking for forgiveness now before I throw all this stuff at you. But we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff today. And honestly, I think you'll find it very interesting. We're going to talk about cool sounding theories. We're going to talk about real theories of motivation. We're going to talk about hunter-gatherers, ancient human cave drawings, accountants, employer culture, the industrial revolutions. We're going to talk about 80s hair metal and the C-suite. We're going to talk about all these things. And trust me, it's all going to make sense. If it doesn't, you have me to blame. We're going to go everywhere except the moon. But my goal today is to help you all with as many, to provide you with as many potential ways to describe concrete and abstract HCM to your organization, to potentially derive the most maximum potential benefit from your HCM deployments and your vision for HCM. All right, let's talk about something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, many of you have probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and many of you may not have. So let's just take a few minutes to go over this. In 1943, I believe it was 1943. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure it was 1943. A fellow by the name of Abraham Maslow. It escapes me at the moment where he actually was a researcher, but it was, I believe, one of the Ivy League universities. He came up with a theory of motivation, or a theory of just what is it that how is it that humans go about existing, and what is it that they look for in their lives, and what are they preoccupied with, and these sorts of things. And he created a hierarchy, and it's usually depicted as a pyramid, as you can see on the screen here. And at the lowest levels, you have sort of your basics, your essentials, physiological and safety. This is all about food, water, and shelter. And the idea is that humans, what they need to do is they need to secure their food and water and their shelter, and know that that's sort of a perpetual thing, that they have a constant source for those things, before they can start thinking about some of these other things like love and belonging, esteem, and the ultimate, if you will, self-actualization. So it goes from bottom up. This is the idea, again, this is Abraham Maslow's theory, and that is that humans need to satisfy these lower levels of needs, and once they have, they start to move up again linearly, from hierarchically, from the bottom up, slowly but surely, slowly and hopefully satisfying these other needs: love and belonging, and then esteem, and then self-actualization. So let's think about that for a minute. That's kind of an interesting way to think about HCM. So if we were to look at HCM against the backdrop of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We have along the left-hand side, I've replicated them here for you. You have physiological safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. And then here we have, well, what are some of the things that might match up with physiological if we're talking about HCM in the workplace? Well, maybe time and attendance and payroll, right? We need to, what are some of the essentials, bare essentials of employing people or being employed as a person? Having a job, right? You need to be paid. You need to make sure that you get paid. You need to make sure you have the right hours, right? You have hours that fit your schedule at the bare minimum way, right? And then we get into safety, right? Where we get into regulatory compliance, right? And then we have love and belonging. And that may be where we start to talk about employee engagement, having engaged employees, hopefully positively engaged employees, because it's love and belonging, right? And then we have esteem. This may be where we talk about, okay, are they satisfied with their jobs? Maybe they're engaged, positively engaged, but are they really satisfied with their jobs? All right. And then self-actualization. This is all about career mobility. Okay, in my job, am I able to actualize in a professional way, or in whatever avocation I'm involved in? Am I able to move forward? Am I able to do new things and learn and become better as an employee? And from an organizational standpoint, is our workforce becoming better and more knowledgeable? And then we have an attractive employer culture, also self-actualization. I would argue on an aggregate sort of organizational level. So if we were to overlay abstract and concrete HCM as a Venn diagram here, you would see that we have this stuff at the bottom is almost pure play concrete HCM, right? And as you move up here, you have a little bit of mix of both, right? And then we get to the top and it's mostly abstract. So that's one way of thinking about concrete and abstract HCM as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with the analogs for Maslow's needs being those that we see on the right here, the right-hand side for HCM. The most essential stuff here, right? And as we move up the ranks, some of the, and I already know some of you might be thinking, well, what is actually employer culture is really, really important. Job satisfaction is really important. So what is he saying? The most important needs on the bottom. See, this, you're already anticipating. If you're thinking that, you're already anticipating why Maslow's hierarchy of needs may not actually be the best way of thinking about HCM in terms of concrete and abstract HCM. But it does make sense. And if you want a way to kind of describe this to your organizational leadership or to stakeholders in the organization that may be struggling to understand the importance of some of these other things, you can present it to them in this way, and it will open their eyes, in my humble opinion. But let's just talk about this for a minute. So I'm about to go climb on a hill and die on it, metaphorically speaking, not literally. But I'm gonna just kind of say here that I think these higher level things like employer culture, career mobility, engaged employees, and job satisfaction, I don't think we were really even thinking about these things in the world of work until frankly, computer automation came on the scene and reached critical mass. And I would say maybe the latter half, the midway through the latter half of the 20th century is when computer automation really started to take hold. And of course, many things have been automated by now. But before that, I would say that the idea that work was an exchange of mental or physical labor for pay and nothing more was the prevailing attitude. It was partially driven by the meta landscape and the state of technology. Again, going back to that computer automation idea. And in fact, if you look at it, we've been through you've probably seen something like this before in other presentations, but I just think it's so powerful that I want to share it here. Over the past 217 years, we have been through just an incredibly, just absolutely sweeping, profound revolution in the world of work, right? We went from steam power, I think it was 1804. Okay, it was in 1804 that a Cornish man, I'm just making sure I get this name right, by the name of Cornishman. That's an area of Scotland, I believe, by the name of Richard Trevithick, and I probably mangled his name. But the first steam engine that actually steam locomotive that actually went a distance, actually moved. All right, it went about 10 miles. And that was again in 1804, 217 years ago. So I was looking up the average lifespan of a male in the United States, and 75 years, according to the CDC in 2020. So imagine you put 3 75-year-old males flush up against each other, their lifetimes. So 1, 2, 3, or we'll go 1, 2, 3. All right, one after the other. Let's see. That's a little bit more time. That's actually longer than it's been since the first steam locomotive made that 10-mile trek. So that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Right? And we were still trying to figure out motorized mobility at that time. I don't think it gets any more basic than this. And I don't think it was, I suspect it wasn't for a long time that employees got any of these newfangled ideas into their heads about career mobility or employer culture or any of this, right? Employer culture was whatever it was. You just went to work. That was work culture. And I'm not saying that that's good. I'm just saying that this was the way it was because that's all we knew for a very long time. It wasn't until we were afforded some of these luxuries, I think, in terms of the computer automation, and that would be the third revolution here, that we really started thinking about some of these higher level, more abstract employee feelings-based ideas around work. And that's not to say they haven't always been important. I would argue that they have always been important. It's just that we haven't been able to really focus on them collectively in the macro until relatively recently. So just looking at this screen here, this slide is a bit of a mess. I'll be first to admit that, but that's what happens when you knock things down. In my defense, so if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you knock it down on its side. You put that pyramid going horizontally, as you can see here. Then things they line up pretty interestingly, don't they? You have steam power and mass production during the first and second industrial revolutions. I would say that we were mostly concerned with physiological and safety needs, or the most basic essentials of employment at that time, right? Then you get into computer automation, just as I was saying a few minutes, just past few minutes. That's where we started to be able to think about love and belonging and all of that, and esteem. And then we're getting into self-actualization, and you see self-transcendence there. I'm about to get to that. This is a cyber-physical revolution, which frankly is an entire other presentation. It's a little bit, some of it's a little bit scary, to be honest with you, but it's this joining or combination of human and machine, being AI and all of this. And I think that if we negotiate it well, we will be able to coexist with AI in the not the very near future, but the not too distant sort of mid future. I think we'll find a nice happy medium. But it's this idea that maybe with some of this AI and stuff, maybe we'll be able to see some of this self-actualization, self-transcendence in the work world, in the macro. So I just thought that was interesting, knocking down Maslow's hierarchy of needs on its side. But let's think about this a little bit. All right, let's just step back. All right, and I just want to mention this here. Maslow had this later career idea that what came after self-actualization, self-transcendence, occurs at the very highest and most inclusive or holistic levels of human consciousness. Make of that what you will, but I think it's interesting. Let's look at this guy here. Who is this guy? In this screen. Well, he has jeans on, so he's not an actual cave person. But let's pretend he's a cave person. Or let's pretend he's somebody. Let's imagine he's somebody that's just there in nature, kind of thinking about, okay, what was it like? What was it like way back when we had the cave people and they were hunter-gatherers? What occupied your thoughts as a hunter-gatherer? Well, it's food, water, and shelter, wasn't it? And a few other things, and that's what. Did you have time to ponder love and belonging, esteem, or self-actualization, let alone self-transcendence? Of course not. Of course not. That's what somebody would say. Let me just move my screen a little bit. Someone would probably say, of course not. They were just worried about surviving. But I wonder, okay, if we move on to the next screen here. I mean, sure, you were busy hunting and hauling off food for your small, agile tribe, but this doesn't mean you couldn't daydream about the more abstract aspects of existence. In fact, you did. We have the cave drawings to prove it. And to just keep to yourself, some of these ideas that maybe it was pictures of drawings of space aliens or whatever, right? But when everyone was huddled close in their cave at the end of the day, you doodled on the walls of the cave. You drew pictures. What was motivating you? Well, I think it was an aspiring or a yearning for something more. So I think what we're getting at here is that you can think about the bare, as an employee, you can think about the bare essentials of work. Whether I'm getting paid on time, whether I'm getting whether I know my hours in time, whether I'm getting my hours, my 40 hours. You can think about those bare essentials and also be fixated or aware of and focused on some of these higher level things as well. So let's talk about a guy named Clayton Alderfer. In 1969, Yale researcher Clayton Alderfer looked at Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs and thought, and I'm paraphrasing because we don't actually have this quoted anywhere. I'm paraphrasing. I'm sort of ascertaining, inferring what he said. He said, this could be simplified. Oh, and we're thinking about all these things at the same time. All right. So these are the origins of Erg theory, which, especially in the realm of the workplace, aligns much better with ideas around human motivation and concrete and abstract HCM. So looking at this here, basically what Alderfer did was he took this whole hierarchy and he consolidated it. That's sort of the straightforward thing he did. But he said, okay, safety and physiological, that all falls under the category of existence, right? And then love and belonging, in some of esteem, that's around relatedness, right? My relatedness to other people in the workplace. or wherever it is I am. And then growth, where it's a higher levels of esteem, and then self-actualization. And maybe you could make the argument that growth also encompasses self-transcendence, but let's just leave self-transcendence to the side for the remainder of this. Now, if we look at this, right, this is pretty interesting. We have existence aligning with concrete at HCM. Sort of those bare essentials, that stuff that makes sense, very translatable to the general ledger, all this kind of thing. It's all the essentials of employing people. But then we have the abstract around growth and relatedness. That's pretty interesting. But what if I were to tell you that in his theory of ERG, Alderfer argues that we are thinking about all these things at the same time. So let's say your existence is very well accounted for. There's just a well-oiled machine providing all the basics. Accounting for all the basics in your employment, whether it's your existence, whether it's payroll, or the punching in for shifts or whatever. It's a well-oiled machine. There's a really good employee self-service portal in there, and you have no complaints. All right, so you're able to focus on relatedness and growth without any impediments or without any concerns for existence. But let's say that your existence is not provided for in the most efficient hum of the refrigerator in the background way for you at work, right? Well, Alderfer would say that you're going to compensate for that by focusing even more on relatedness and growth, rather than necessarily, you might complain very well about your existence, but you're going to gossip with your employees, with your colleagues. You're going to talk more with them, and maybe complain or grouse with them about it. You're going to maybe try for more growth at work, or maybe try for growth elsewhere. All right, so that's just one way. Or let's say that there's no opportunity to communicate with your colleagues, or very little opportunity to fraternize with your colleagues at work. But existence is taken care of pretty well, and yeah, you have plenty of learning opportunities. That actually is a depiction of what's going on for a lot of folks post, during all these lockdowns from the past year or so, right? And that was a big challenge for work from home, was to support relatedness in the workplace, and that's where a lot of this employee communication technology comes into play. The whole idea here is that HCM is entirely abstract, the entire thing, and entirely concrete at the same time. So if you think about your pay, how much you're making as an employee, that's a concrete number. That seems to be the most concrete, the most easily expressed as a concrete aspect of HCM. But at the same time, imagine that you don't get paid on time. You don't get that number. That's about payroll processing, a very concrete aspect of HCM. But at the same time, that employee that is not paid on time, that employee is going to be very upset. There's going to be a wave of emotions and just fear and all of this going through that person's mind, because existence is about feelings too, isn't it? So here we have this idea that HCM is concrete and abstract all at the same time. And just to put a fine point on things, every aspect of HCM has a concrete expression. Some of those concrete expressions are easier to discern. It's easier to figure out what they are. Those are the expressions, the concrete expressions that that's the realm of HCM that makes the most sense to accountants, to the bean counters in your organization, right? So down here, existence. The existence piece of HCM. So HCM accounts for, supports employees' existence. That piece of HCM is seemingly more concrete and less abstract. But I just want to make it clear that it is actually very abstract. It just seems more concrete because the concrete expression is so much more easily recognized, right? As we move up the ladder here, and one thing I hope you're sort of getting here is that it actually isn't moving from bottom up here, but it's shown that way so that it can be depicted against Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But in any event, this is where, in these areas of HCM, growth and relatedness, this is where HCM is seemingly more abstract and less concrete. And it is indeed very abstract still, right? I would say it's in ways equally as abstract. The reason it seems less concrete is because the measurements, the numbers that we can come up with to coincide with aspects of relatedness or growth, it takes more work to think of those numbers and what those measurements may be. But I would argue that all of it is potentially measurable. It's just that we need to learn how to measure some of it still. All right. So I just want to get the idea of the employee experience in here, right? So we have concepts collide. This is a ham-fisted play on a Seinfeld meme. Again, the Gen Xers in the audience will get this. There was a point where George Costanza said, "Worlds collide, Jerry," and he was talking about he had two different lives. I don't want to give away the episode. It's really funny, but in any event, here we have concepts collide. So you have this idea of growth, relatedness, and existence. That's ERG theory. That's Alderfer right there, right? And then we have concrete and abstract that aligns. So all of this is concrete and abstract at the same time. And then you see that circle behind. If you were watching the animation while I was talking about Seinfeld there, the circle, the background circle, that coincided with the employee experience. The employee experience encompasses existence, relatedness, and growth. Or simplified or thought of in another way, concrete and abstract HCM. That is the employee experience right there. And it's all happening at the same time. And this is just, from a visual standpoint, an attempt to depict that, to show that visually to you folks. It's all happening at the same time. All right. So we've talked about cave people, hunter-gatherers today. And I promised you that we would talk about 80s hair metal as well. What's interesting here is, and we're about to, abstract HCM is your employee's feelings. And everything about HCM, even payroll, has to do with employees' feelings. When you think about ERG theory, with Clayton Alderfer and the ideas that he set forth, we have this idea that there's existence, and we have those needs, our basic needs. We have to have food and water and shelter. And here we have our cave person, this hunter-gatherer, and of course today in the modern world, our existence is very much, at least in the first world, in the advanced nations, it's very much made available. It's accounted for, right? Here we have a cave person. It's kind of a funny way of depicting it. Cave person, sort of. I think that's a McDonald's. That's a tray of a McDonald's meal. Okay, so that's sort of an irony there, and I think that's pretty interesting. That our existence has very much been accounted for. It's the hum of the refrigerator in the background, and I think that's very interesting. And that's the E. That's the E in ERG theory. But even cave people, hunter-gatherers, they had feelings. mostly a fear of where the next meal or place to sleep would be. And we've accounted for that now in modern society. And also in the workplace, we have the technology today to make the existence portion of an employee's experience just a well-oiled machine. No hiccups, basically no hiccups, just completely just efficient and no problems whatsoever. We have that. And so we can, if you want to think in sort of societally, right, we can focus on growth, relatedness and growth, but also in the workplace. There's really no excuse for us not to focus on growth and relatedness. G and R. There's your 80s hair metal reference. But all kidding aside, right? There's no excuse in today's technological landscape not to have it in place so that you can focus on employees' growth and relatedness. Let's just look at this another way, all right? Or just slightly, let's shift just a little bit here. See, employee feelings? This is this idea that HCM is all about employee feelings, all right? And employee feelings can be abstract, but they also have concrete expressions. And you have the two sort of these are in case it's unclear, these are supposed to be two magnifying glasses lining up completely perfectly here. All right, and they're each looking at employee feelings, but one lens is looking at it through the perspective of abstract HCM, and the other is looking at it through the perspective of concrete HCM. And you can see how this stuff all interrelates. There is always a counterbalancing abstract or concrete expression for anything in HCM. So you have, okay, do I get to interact with colleagues? That's relatedness, right? Does my manager understand me? Are my teammates my tribe? These my peeps. Where's my career going? Should I stay at this job? Is my work interesting or fun? Am I being paid what I'm worth? I mean, talk about something abstract, totally subjective. I mean, you have market forces and a range of other variables that do indeed determine what a person is paid, including that person's ability to negotiate for himself or herself. But at the end of the day, is that pay, is there any real objective truth about that pay? That's interesting. I just went down a rabbit hole, but that's very abstract. Do my hours jive with my family life? That's all about work-life balance. This is all relatedness and growth. You look at existence, though. Did I get 40 hours this week? Right? Oh gosh, I hope I got 40 hours this week, or because I need to make my car payment next week, and I'll be really low on funds if that doesn't happen. Do I have health insurance? Can I survive on this pay? So that's very concrete. That's there's really no wiggle room there. That person basically knows whether they have enough money to survive. Maybe there may actually be some wiggle room there. Maybe they could cook ramen noodles as opposed to going to getting takeout every day. But it doesn't matter. That person has that concrete existence related concern. Will I be paid on time? Where's my act? Will I be paid on time? I would say that that's something we've solved most everywhere, except maybe at some startups, which is for various other reasons. But in any event, then we have, where's my access code? Do I have a computer yet? And that's just a little interesting tangent just for the moment around this idea that some of this even intersects with enterprise resource planning and some other areas of the enterprise. So it's not even just HCM. Let's look at it one more way. We've gone left to right and bottom up for most of the things that we've talked about today. There have been some circles involved as well, okay? But what if we were to think backward? Thinking backward, that is thinking backwards. HR is all about feelings, and the employee experience is all about their feelings. That's the abstract, right? But if you go thinking backward, if you think about, so let me back up. Most organizations, they think about the concrete expressions of HCM, the most readily apparent concrete expressions of HCM, the existence related areas of HCM first. And then abstract HCM, that's a nice sort of secondary or byproduct result, and because all of existence also has to do with abstract HCM, you do get abstract results which are good for the organization, good for employee feelings, good for the employee experience. But what if we thought about employee feelings first, right? And then we traced back to what the concrete expressions might be. So we think about, okay, does my employee feel safe? Does my employee feel respected? Okay, that has to do with pay levels and a few other things, right? Okay, is my employee happy in the job, or is this top performing employee thinking about leaving? All right, these are feelings based things for the employee. Well, how would you measure that? Well, you might have a flight risk score if you have a system that's able to do that. Or, compliance. Okay, do employees feel safe? They feel like they're going to survive their shift. I've looked at HCM deployments in the past where it was a very dangerous work environment, working with chemicals, wearing hazmat suits and all sorts of things. And as an employee, you want to know for sure that your employer is following the law and has all the proper equipment available for you. Maybe even is even going above and beyond what the law says to keep it really safe for you. But that's all about compliance, right? We have maybe we're looking at our organization. We're thinking, gosh, I mean, it would be great if we could promote people from within, right? Because then we could keep our intellectual property, and we could preserve this employer culture. We wouldn't have to do all this stuff to figure out external people. Well, that's about increasing internal hires. All right, and there are all sorts of metrics around that you could concrete expressions of that, measurements that you could come up with. Or the next one, overtime paid, right? How much overtime am I paying folks? And you looking at that, if there was a lot of overtime paid, maybe that means the employees are well, it depends on the demographic employees. Some of them might be really happy about that, and some of them might not be at all, right? So if you have an unhappy workforce, if you're getting that vibe, or maybe you did some sort of a pulse survey, you got that vibe, but then you might want to think, maybe you want to look at overtime. Maybe that's the reason. Who knows? You want to decrease retention, right? That's a number that the bean counters can understand, especially if you think about this SHRM number that's been around for a while. I believe it is the cost to replace an employee is anywhere from 90% to 200% of that employee's annual pay, depending on the type of role. And there's probably some roles where it's where it's less than 90%, but for the vast majority, I mean, that's a number that the folks in your organization that look at HCM through a concrete lens are going to understand, and it's going to it's going to help you to start getting to the bottom of some of these employee experience and employee feelings related issues that are really at play in the background and are honestly a more profound indication of organizational health. Or you might look at your Glassdoor score, right? So you're thinking, okay, how do I present the idea of employer culture to my leadership? They're looking at us as they just look at HCM through numbers. How do I do this? Well, your Glassdoor score is one way of doing it, and there are plenty of others. All right, these are just examples of thinking backward to get to think about the employee feelings first and then figuring out, okay, what's the concrete expression? It's really an exercise. So I want to just throw one more idea at you, and this is idea of left brain and right brain thinking. You may have thought, and this didn't occur to me right away, but after I started thinking about concrete and abstract HCM for a while, I thought, wait a minute, this has to do with left brain and right brain thinking. So it's actually the right brain. The right brain is the creative, sort of the emotional, more right brain thinkers are more emotional, maybe more creative. They're more about people's feelings and maybe a little bit more empathetic and these sorts of things, right? And then people who are left brain, they're more about numbers and math and just straight ahead logic. It's not that they aren't creative, but they're more about those sort of hard things, right? Well, that is kind of like what it is with abstract and concrete HCM, right? And if you think about it within the context of Erg theory, right brain thinking, again, the creative, emotional side, that's more about relatedness and growth, whereas that left brain thinking, the logical, very straight logic, mathematical, just the numbers, this sort of thing, that's really existence. That's the existence realm of ERG. Well, you think about your organization's leadership and who in the C-suite and everyone working in those folks related departments, right? Who's more left brain and who's more right brain? Well, okay, your CFO for sure is very left brained. Okay, probably the COO and CIO or CTO, or perhaps you have both. Those folks are probably really left brain thinkers. They're all about maybe they're all about STEM and this sort of stuff, right? They are a compelling counterpoint, right, to the voices of the right brain thinking in the organization, the CHRO, the chief people officer, and maybe the chief marketing officer, right? And a good CEO will synthesize, all this thinking, this left brain and right brain thinking, will be good at hearing it all, hearing it out, and maybe like Captain Picard or Captain Kirk, if you're into Star Trek at all, just being good at listening to all that stuff and then making a judgment call by synthesizing all that information, a judgment call that takes into account both ways of thinking, right? If you're an organization that has a CEO that's good at that, then you're well along the way. You have one less impediment to explaining abstract HCM to them and having them having the organization appreciate the idea. But even if not, you can still think about, okay, every abstract element of HCM, every employee feeling has a potential concrete expression. Some of them, yes. Some of these, yes, are going to make more sense and have a greater chance at first blush of resonating with your accountants or other left brain thinkers in the organization, left brain leadership to get budget. But you do have concrete expressions of everything for HCM. And so you can potentially show numbers for anything, and that's going to bring you a long way. And, this whole idea of left brain and right brain in the C-suite, Accenture actually came out with this idea in mid-2019, pre-COVID, which that's an entirely other conversation. But in any event, they came out with this idea of a whole brain leadership. It was this idea that the best leaders in an organization, they're able to exercise their right brain and left brain thinking, whether it be any one individual in the C-suite or just the organization as a whole exhibits a nice mix, a good balance of left brain and right brain thinking. That's whole brain leadership. So I just thought that was interesting. I wanted to share that with you all because this isn't just about concrete and abstract HCM. This is about concrete and abstract organizational thinking. These are, oops. Well, that's okay. What was going to show up in the previous slide is I accidentally hit the clicker too soon, but those were just a few headlines that I found online around whole brain leadership and Accenture's thinking around that. They did a survey, I think, of around 200 C-level executives in that. So, there are some difficult roads here, but they lead to beautiful destinations, and that is a great employer culture that's going to ensure the perpetuity of your organization. I want to share a couple more thoughts with you. One is the idea of I like to call it the totality of HCM. The totality of HCM is existence, relatedness, and growth, all right? Erg Theory, right? Existence is the one area of HCM that seems the most concrete and is most translatable to the general ledger, is most translatable to mitigating risk and reducing costs. And that's one of the reasons that HCM has been seen as sort of a cost center. But everybody knows in their heart of hearts that employee engagement, job satisfaction, and all these other employee morale, and all this is just absolutely essential to to organizational success. The thing is that so much of that is not quantifiable from a financial standpoint. It just, it really isn't, except when the organization is no longer a going concern, which is a term that accountants understand all too well. So if you're an organization and you're filed for bankruptcy and you're going out of business, well, that's the ultimate financially quantifiable consequence of being in business. And I would argue that the totality of HCM is directly influences that. And the reason that relatedness and growth aren't as easily translatable or aren't translatable at all to the general ledgers because there's just too many factors involved. You can't actually isolate it to show that number, but it is nevertheless affecting the number, which is very interesting to point out. And just one last idea I'd like to leave you with is this. It's a courtroom analogy, okay? Someone can be convicted of a crime if there is a preponderance of circumstantial evidence, right? So, if we can put someone to prison for life with a preponderance of circumstantial evidence, then shouldn't we be able to apply the same level of proof in HCM or in business, right? So if there's a preponderance of evidence of just, we have a great employee culture, we have all these things, employee engagement, and we need to make this stuff even better, that to me is enough evidence. And that's another argument that you can use in your organization to maybe move the needle, maybe expand the power center, the decision-making circle in your organization to make some things around more employee feelings related initiatives happen. So that's Concrete and Abstract HCM, and I want to thank you very much for joining me today. And I hope that these ideas will help you to present the potential of HCM in a more effective way, in an ever more effective way to your various stakeholders and leadership in your organization. Thank you very much.